I'm Syed Ajlal Hyder, Head of Practice Review and Support Program. So what is Audit Practice Review and Support Program? Actually, this program that is designed for this external reviewer program is basically focused on revision of international financial reporting standards. And the focus is on key standards which are generally used during practice reviews, whether conducted for non-QCR rated firms or conducted for quality control rated firms. So it equally applies to both of the cases, as well as those members who are working in the industry. So it is equally valuable for all. The program Audit Practice Review and Support Program, it is basically a periodic review of non-quality control rated firms. Since this is the requirement of SMO1, which is an obligation statement of members obligation by IFAC, that an annual monitoring system should be in place for all audit firms which are engaged in audit. And that is why either a firm has to be subject to a quality control review or a practice review. So under this program, practice review, it started the review started in October 2021. Periodic visits are done basically to all audit firms in which we review the working paper files and audited financial statements. Non-compliances, if any, are communicated to the firm, and there are for all those deficiencies or matters, suggestions for improvements are given against each. So then a practice review, if a practice review of a firm is concluded as satisfactory, then the next review for that firm is done after a period of 2.5 years. And if a practice review of the firm is concluded as unsatisfactory, then it is subject to a full or partial re-review within next 1 year. What are the objectives of practice review? So basically, the objective of practice review is that an audit firm, in providing its audit, assurance, or related services, a firm is compliant with professional standards. This term, basically, professional standards, is defined in the Audit Practice Review and Support Program Framework, APRSP framework for short. And that professional standards includes compliance with international standards on auditing, IFRS, legal pronouncements, directives of ICAP. So it encompasses all of these areas. So whether a firm is compliant with all of these areas in audit, assurance, and related services, so it covers that. So even if a firm is engaged in assurance or related services, it is subject to practice review. However, the program currently has been started with a focus on audit. So we are currently reviewing audit engagements. However, the framework covers assurance and related as well. Secondly, the objective is to ensure that the firm complies with training regulations of firm deploying students as per the council directive. So training regulations are whether they are being followed in letter and spirit or not. That is also one of the objectives of practice review. Thirdly, members are compliant with CPT requirements of the institute. So if CPT requirements are short or deficient, so these are also covered under practice review. Next, the scope of practice review. So all non-QCR rated firms, whether engaged in audit, assurance, or related services, are basically within the scope of audit practice review. A new practice review firm shall be subject to practice review after 2 years. Sorry, I just saw a couple of hand raises, so I would request that for each presentation or this session, we would take questions at the end. So kindly keep your questions till the end, so that once the presenter is done with its things, and then we can take one by one questions. Okay, thank you. So a new practice review firm, which is newly registered with ICAP, so that shall be subject to practice review after 2 years of completion of its registration period. Right, and a firm who gets whose name gets removed from QCR rating. So that firm will be now not part of QCR rating, so it will be subject to practice review. However, if the firm does apply for another QCR and gets QCR within 1 year of removal again, it applies again and gets QCR again within 1 year of removal, so then it can be only subject to QCR, and we will not conduct a practice review for that firm. During each practice review, 50% of the partners carrying out audit engagements shall be reviewed in each review. So likewise, accordingly, we will cover all of the audit partners of the firm once in next 5 years. A firm can be subject to an additional practice review if it inducts 50% or more members. So if there is a case that the firm inducts new partners, let's say a firm has 2 partners initially, and then it inducts 50% or more new members. Let's say it adds 2 more partners, and those 2 partners are also engaged in audit. So in that case, since there is a change of 50% in the firm, it will be subject to practice review within next 1 year, regardless of the previous review. And those partners which have newly joined the firm will definitely be subject to practice review. Then there is another scenario that partners previously who were not engaged in audit, they start doing audit. For instance, if an audit firm has, let's say, 4 partners and currently only one audit partner was doing audit, but then afterward it decides that 2 more partners shall be engaged in audit, and they will also sign audit reports accordingly. So that firm will be subject to practice review again within next 1 year, as those partners are basically changed 50% or more criteria. So in that case, the firm will be subject to additional practice review. Then another case would be merger with another firm not previously engaged in audit. If the firm gets merged with another firm, and through that merger, it gets 2 more, let's say, audit partners who will be engaged in audit. So in that case as well, the partners newly inducted shall be subject to practice review after completion of 1 year. So additional practice review applies in summarily to 3 cases. Number 1, if a firm inducts new partners, freshly new partners inducts 50% or more of the existing strength of audit partners. 1. Second would be if a firm gets merged with another firm which was not previously engaged in audit, but after the merger it starts engaged in audit, in that case as well. And third, previously the partners who were not doing audit start doing audit. So in all of these 3 cases, the firm shall be subject to practice review after completion of 1 year. Now we discuss the process of practice review. Okay, now the process of practice review. Practically speaking, the process would be exactly similar to that, and that is followed within quality control review, QCR review. A notice is sent to the firm indicating that the review of the firm is due. This notice is also sent to new firms which were not reviewed in the previous cycle, and it also applies to those firms which have been reviewed earlier and in the next re-review. So the notice can be of a re-review as well. So notice is sent to the firm. Notice shall be served with 30 days prior to the review date. So if the firm, so in all cases, notice shall be sent 30 days prior to the review date that is basically indicated by the practice review department. The firm shall provide a planning questionnaire within 30 days of that notice. Planning questionnaire is basically a list of audit engagements. The format is prescribed on ICAP website under the tab of APRSP. So it is only in a format for list of audit engagements of the firm and prescribes like certain information is there, like revenue uh, is mentioned, profit before tax is mentioned, total assets are mentioned, and audit opinion, that is also mentioned. So once the firm submits planning questionnaire within the due days of 30 days indicated in the notice, then the director of practice review shall assign a reviewer to conduct the review, and reviewer shall visit the firm on that date agreed. So continuing the process of practice review, the reviewer shall select 2 audit engagement files for each partner selected. So the firm shall indicate the list of audit engagements, which is termed as planning questionnaire. And out of that planning questionnaire, the reviewer shall select 2 audit engagement files for each of the partner. An additional file may be selected if deemed necessary. So I'll explain how. Initially, 2 engagement files shall be reviewed. And if the reviewer is of the view that one of those audit engagement files potentially has certain reportable deficiencies which are significant, and there are significant deficiencies noted in a file. So in that case, and the other file does not have that, like the other file is satisfactory, it does not have any significant reportable deficiencies, but one file has significant reportable deficiencies. So in order to make a conclusion regarding majority of audit engagements reviewed, the reviewer shall select a third audit engagement file, and then he will review the third audit engagement accordingly. How that will be reviewed, I'll explain it a little later. So if 2 of the files are satisfactory, that is, they do not have significant reportable deficiencies, so they will be termed as satisfactory. And if one file has significant reportable deficiencies, so because of the majority of audit engagements are satisfactory, the firm may be concluded by the members affairs committee as satisfactory. So since the decision shall be made on majority, so a third file, NAD, which is known as additional file, may also be selected. However, if in case the reviewer reviews 2 audit engagements and he finds out, or he is of the view that both of the audit engagement files do have significant reportable deficiencies and both may be considered as unsatisfactory by the committee, so in that case, there is no need for an additional file, and the conclusion may be made by reviewing only 2 audit engagements. So summarily, either both of the files have to be satisfactory, or both of the files are unsatisfactory. There is no question of additional file. However, if one file is satisfactory and one is unsatisfactory, potentially, so then a third file, which is additional file, it can be reviewed. Now, during review, the reviewer shall give a preference to current engagement files with revenue exceeding 100 million or share capital exceeding 50 million. So either of the criteria may be considered during review of the files. For instance, if a revenue is exceeding 100 million but share capital is less than that, so it is mutually exclusive. So either of the case applicable can be considered. And if a firm does not have such engagements, or the risk profile lies in some else in any other engagement, so since it is only a preference case, so the reviewer may, for reasons to be discussed with the director, he may select any other file which does not fall within this criteria. But let's say the revenue is 80 million, but he is of the view that the file potentially has certain risks, and that file may be reviewed. So he will discuss with the director, and the selection may be made for that file. Well, generally the files are, mostly the files are based on IFRS for SMEs. Mostly we review the medium-sized engagements, But there are also audit engagements which are based on IFRS. Generally, 30% or around 30% cases are IFRS based. So both of the scenarios fall in our domain, that we review files for IFRS for SMEs and IFRS. So both of the frameworks are applicable. The reviewer shall review financial statements and engagement file. So let me explain it a little detail. During the process of review, the reviewer should get a good and comprehensive reading initially to the financial statements, so that in a manner that he should be able to identify any risky areas, potentially material and risky areas, and he might be able to identify certain uh, important disclosure deficiencies, or, and most importantly, some measurement and recognition errors or deficiencies that were not recorded, certain items that should have been recorded but were not recorded. So he would be able to identify, or certain items which were applicable but were required to be recognized by IFRS or IFRS for SMEs in a different manner, but these are recognized in a different manner. Let me give you examples. For instance, during review of financial statements, the reviewer can easily identify that if the number of employees exceed a certain threshold, then retirement benefit is applicable on that company, but that retirement benefit has not been recorded. So that is potentially one of the measurement and recognition issues. Secondly, if the company is in profits and has not recognized workers' profit participation fund or workers' welfare fund, that is also one of the requirements. We are not considering that might be material or might not be material. That is another question, but he would be able to identify all those deficiencies regarding measurement and recognition. Secondly, for instance, let's say there is a land owned by the company, and that is lying idle and with no plans of any future expansion or future expansion. So in that case, ideally, it should be recognized as an investment property under IFRS. So, but that might have been recognized as an owner-occupied property. So in that case, the reviewer shall have to make a point, make an observation that it is misclassified, is not correctly classified. So in that case, he might be able to identify certain classification or presentation errors as well during the review of financial statements. Now, during review of an audit engagement file. During review of an audit engagement file, the reviewer shall review all audit procedures which are applicable on that particular area. For instance, we expect the reviewer to be capable enough and competent enough to identify, let's say, if he is reviewing trade debts and the amount is material, he's reviewing trade debts. So he should be able to identify which were the key audit procedures which should have been followed for trade debts. For instance, confirmations were required, whether the confirmations have been duly sent, circulated according to the requirements, and whether they were responded or not. Okay, if they were not responded, whether that sample has been correctly concluded by performance of additional audit procedures, like through subsequent clearance or through maybe invoice testing or any other procedures considered appropriate. Secondly, the reviewer should be able to identify that, let's say, trade debts. So what are the relevant ISA international standards on auditing applicable on that area, and whether those have been correctly, those audit procedures which are highlighted by, let's say, ISA 505 for external confirmations. So whether those requirements have been complied, and ISA 500 audit evidence. So appropriate and sufficient and appropriate audit evidence has been obtained or not in that respective audit area. Similarly, for revenue, you would also see all the assertions like cutoff and accordingly um, recognition of the revenue is appropriate, policies appropriate in accordance with the IFRS or applicable IFRS for SMEs, whatever is applicable. So policies appropriate and correctly recognized into the correct period, proper cutoff, and due relates to the company and all. So whatever are the audit procedures that are applicable to any particular line item of the financial statements which the reviewer is reviewing, he should be able to identify the requirements of measurement recognition from the respective IFRS and auditing standards from the respective ISA. And thirdly, applicable laws, for instance, disclosure requirements through Companies Act, or if the company is engaged into any particular business which attracts any other laws as well. So he should be able to identify compliance with those laws which might have a potentially material impact on the financial statements. Just like I gave example of WPPF, WWF, and retirement benefits. So which is requirements of labor law, let's say industrial, commercial establishment standing orders. So he should be able to identify and review those requirements. So in such manner that this matter for review of financial statements and the review of audit engagement file, this will be covered in detail by my colleague in the next session, Fahad Parvez. He will cover all the procedures, how to conduct a QCR. So in the following session today, he will discuss these matters in detail. So as I mentioned in the start, that the procedures for practice review and quality control review would be the same. Like it might be a difference of the size of financial statements and the applicable framework. Like it might be an IFRS for SME for most of the cases of practice review, but it would be IFRS for most of the cases of quality control review. Next, reviewer shall review ISQC 1, International Standards on Quality Control 1 documentation. As of now, since it is ISQC 1 is applicable, so once ISQM will be applicable, so we would be reviewing the documentation requirements of ISQM 1 and 2 both. So as of now, the reviewer shall also review the ISQC 1 documentation. Now, what kind of documentation? He would review whether the firm has a quality control manual, number one, and whether the manual of quality control, those policies and procedures of ISQC1, all of those which are required to be there for an audit firm, whether all of those procedures are mentioned in the manual, one. Number two, for all of those procedures, policies and procedure, whether there is an element, there is an evidence of implementation as well. So whether the firm has also implemented that ISQC1 in letter and spirit, whether it has actually been implemented. For instance, monitoring requirements, human resource requirements, engagement performance, so client acceptance. So whether all of those requirements which are required and mentioned in ISQC1 as well as the firm manual, so whether all of those policies and procedures have been actually followed during all audit engagements. So all of the monitoring requirements, so all of those cold reviews, hot reviews. Hot reviews would be not be applicable in our cases because most of the files are unlisted and basically all of the unlisted files are reviewed. However, the cold reviews, which are cyclical reviews, so whether those are being done or not. So all of the requirements of ISQC1, whether they are actually followed or not. So reviewer shall review the evidence regarding that. For a review of the financial statements, we basically use a checklist as well, which is based either on IFRS for SMEs or IFRS, whatever is applicable. So on the field reviews, two types of tasks are generally performed. One is basically the review of financial statements with regard to audit procedures. And secondly, these are being reviewed for disclosure requirements mentioned in IFRS for SMEs or IFRS, whatever is applicable, as well as basically Companies Act. So all of those disclosure requirements mentioned are also reviewed. So for all of these, for all of these disclosure requirements, we do follow an engagement review checklist as well, and a financial statement disclosure checklist as well. Engagement review checklist. I will elaborate it in a little detail. Engagement review checklist basically is a checklist that is already placed on website of ICAP under the tab of Audit Practice Review and Support Program. You can easily find that checklist over there. It basically covers most of the audit procedures and audit procedures which the reviewer has to check, which is reviewer has to review, and also lists compliance with the requirements of ISA as well as Companies Act as regards audit reports, let's say auditors reporting obligations. So it is a comprehensive checklist which is around 70 odd pages. So for each audit engagement, the reviewer has to mention whether he has reviewed all of those areas or not, and on what working paper reference he has basically the firm has complied with all that with that specific requirement. So an engagement review checklist gives a comfort to the reviewer as well as the director that all practice reviews are performed in a consistent and competent manner. So reviewer does not miss out anything specific which was significant and should have been reviewed by the reviewer has not been covered. So to follow a consistent procedure regarding practice reviews and engagement review checklist is followed. Similarly, a financial statement disclosure checklist is also followed. And for each financial statement, a respective checklist is completely filled out, whether applicable for IFRS for SMEs or whether it is applicable for IFRS. So for both of the cases, the reviewer shall complete that checklist. Thirdly, the reviewer shall complete a checklist on ISQC1. So all of the major requirements of ISQC1 are mentioned in that checklist. So reviewer shall not only mention whether those policies and procedures were covered in the firm's manual, but also mention that whether he has been able to see documentation in support of each and every requirement of ISQC1, and shall also mention the working paper at which the firm has placed that documentation. So this covers the areas which are done on field review. Now, after the reviewer is done with the practice review, he concludes that whether there are reportable deficiencies and certain disclosure matters which are generally called as non-reportable matters as well. So he will list all of those deficiencies which he has noted into a form which might be named as a reviewer's findings form, or generally named as reviewer finding form, but a list of deficiencies. He'll make out a list of deficiencies. He will, in each of that deficiency noted, the reviewer should be able to comprehensively state what was required and that has not been placed in the audit file, where it was required, like specific paragraph and requirement of whether international standards on auditing or international financial reporting standard, whatever is applicable, or applicable laws. So he should be mentioning that he should state that specific requirement where it is required, and in a clear manner that no audit evidence was, let's say, he was able to find in the file for that respective area. For any measurement and recognition issue, that error, he should be able to mention that this item should have been basically classified as, let's say, at an X place and has not been correctly classified. It is required to be classified as such by para number this of this. So he should be comprehensively drafting each and every observation. Then, after drafting all of those observations, listing all of those observations, the reviewer, we come to a conclusion of the field review. How? That at the conclusion, the reviewer shall discuss with the engagement partner all of those deficiencies noted. So reviewer should be able to express clearly what was required, what deficiency has been noted in quite a polite manner, and should be able to state that this was required by para number this of this. He should be well versed with the requirements of IFRS and ISA in a practical manner, that this is done generally. This matter is disclosed in the financial statement in such a manner and should be able to discuss in a clear and concise manner with the engagement partner. Then he would request at the conclusion to the engagement partner to provide his written comments for each deficiency that the reviewer has mentioned and noted during his review. Thirdly, most of the important part of the practice review, that at the conclusion of practice review, the reviewer shall basically guide the firm how to improve for each of the area and deficiency that it has noted. For each misclassification, or let's say an error noted in financial statements as regard measurement and recognition, he would explain to the firm, let's say partner or manager and the required staff if the partner wishes to. So he would be explaining for each observation noted that what corrective action should be taken by the firm in order to avoid such observation in future. Secondly, for each audit evidence matter noted, he would describe to the firm that, let's say, this audit procedure has not been followed. It should be followed, number one, and how it should be demonstrated and followed. What kind of audit documentation is expected from the firm, in what manner the firm should be able to document that matter. And secondly, since we have already run quite a lot of firms, so then there are many questions generally at the end of the review from the engagement team as well as the engagement partner for any other matters, which are generally might not be an observation noted for that, but they might ask some explanatory questions and some supplementary questions. So reviewer should be able to respond to all of those questions. So with a response to all those questions and end to a discussion with the engagement partner, this now concludes the process of field review of the practice review, right? So field review is concluded with all of this matter, like disclosure, engagement review checklist, ISQC1, and at the end of that, listing all of those observations in a form, let's say reviewer finding form, and then discussing all of those observations with the engagement partner. So this brings an end to the field review. Then, on coming back, the reviewer shall prepare a draft report within 30 days. So now reviewer shall prepare a draft report. That draft report includes two elements, primarily the observations noted, number one, during field review, and those deficiencies, disclosure deficiencies, presentation deficiencies noted during review of financial statements. So all of those are listed down in the draft report. Thirdly, most important, responses of the engagement partner received by the reviewer, whether in writing or during the ideally they should be given at the end of the review on the same day. However, in certain cases, the engagement partner asks for a couple of days. He requests that I would provide his comments in the next couple of days. So in that case, whenever the reviewer receives those comments in the next couple of days, so he would include those in the draft report. Thirdly, the draft report, after receiving comments, the reviewer shall analyze whether all of those observations which may be considered as resolved, and the engagement partner has been able to provide sufficient documentation and response to that observation, and the observation can be considered as mitigated or invalid, whatever. So if the reviewer considers that this observation can be resolved, so he would also delete that observation. So the draft report would only include those observations which, in reviewer's view, should be sent to the firm and they are not resolved. Secondly, the report shall be reviewed by the director himself before. So the director shall review the draft report in detail. So and discuss all of the matters with the reviewer on which there is a, let's say, a contrasting view. So the reviewer needs to add an explanation to his point of view. So the draft report shall be reviewed by the director in detail and discussed with the reviewer. And after that, whatever observations are remained, they do remain in the draft report, they will be sent to the firm, and the firm will be requested to provide its comments within next 21 days. So in response, the firm shall provide its comments and may also provide any documentation in support of its comments to justify his, let's say, just his point of view. So after receipt of his comments and any supporting documentation, that will be analyzed by the department, the reviewer himself as well. So then a final report shall be made, basically for the consideration of Members Affairs Committee. The Practice Review Department reports to Members Affairs Committee of ICAP. So once the reviewer receives a response, he finalizes the draft report and turns that draft report into a final report for consideration for Members Affairs Committee. Then he would make that draft, and that draft will be reviewed again by director to review that whether there are any other observations which might be considered mitigated after receipt of comments from the firm. So all of those observations which may be considered as resolved, they would be deleted, and the remaining observations shall be submitted to Members Affairs Committee along with response of the firm. So against each observation. So detailed response of the firm shall be presented as it is in front of Members Affairs Committee. The matters presented to Members Affairs Committee are without any identity. So the name of the firm is given a code. So the firm is not presented as the name of the firm. Let's say Ajlal and Co. Ajlal and Co. would be presented as, let's say, the firm code 0789. Let's say. So the firm code 0789 will be presented to Members Affairs Committee. So the name of the firm is not mentioned in that. So members for an objective and independent decision. So the Members Affairs Committee will review in detail all of the reports presented, the response of the firm, and during the meeting, they asks question from the head of department as well as the reviewer that if for any observation they are of the view that the response of the firm is considered appropriate, or they think that there is some additional information that should be obtained by the reviewer to support his point of view, or there is any comment from the firm which requires certain more clarification to validate that observation, whether it is valid or it should be resolved. So in all those cases, they would ask question, and if there is any additional information that is required, so the director would request the firm or the reviewer to provide that information. So after all that, so after a detailed and comprehensive discussion and consideration, the committee shall decide whether each file of the firm may be concluded as satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So the decision of the committee shall be made based on results of majority of the files. So let's say if the reviewer has reviewed 3 files, if 2 of the files are satisfactory, the decision is that satisfactory. And if one of the file may be considered as unsatisfactory, again the decision is satisfactory because 2 of the files are satisfactory. So one is unsatisfactory. The majority is satisfactory, the decision is satisfactory. And thirdly, if the reviewer has reviewed 2 files and for both of them the result is unsatisfactory, so the firm shall be given an unsatisfactory rating. And the results I will elaborate in the next slide. Decision of the committee shall be communicated to the firm through the final report. The final report is signed off by the director practice review in accordance with the decision of the committee. So the final review, final report, I would definitely mention that final report is in a different manner from quality control review. In a quality control review, we just generally the report highlights the observation, the response of the engagement partner, and conclusive response of the reviewer. Generally, these things are mentioned. But in case of practice review, we also mention recommendation for improvement, that which specific requirement of ISA or IFRS or applicable law should be followed by the reviewer, should be followed by the firm in order to avoid that observation in future. So recommendations for improvements are also communicated for each observation, and the detail is a long, and the report is actually a long form report. So for it is in a tabular format. The table describes each observation. For each observation, the firm comments, the reviewer's final review point, and then the conclusive recommendation for improvement. So the records for relating for reviews shall be retained for 1 year, after the year in which the review was decided by MAC. So if the firm, let's say the firm files an appeal, the appeal process will be discussed later in the next, later in the slide, in another slide. And so unless the matter is appealed, the record relating to practice reviews shall be retained for next 1 year in which it has been decided. Now I would mention prerequisites for a reviewer, although I've touched certain details. So reviewer should be a chartered accountant with knowledge of it, at least of these following areas. So IFRS, primarily foremost, IFRS for SMEs, AFRS for SSE. So whatever is the applicable framework, so all of these frameworks, the reviewer should be able to identify that what are those differences between the three. For instance, in IFRS, let's say in IS 19, there is a mandatory requirement for following actuarial valuation techniques. However, IFRS for SMEs does also prescribe that the firm may follow a simplified approach rather than following actuarial valuation. Likewise, in AFRS for SSEs, let's say, deferred taxation may not be considered as mandatory to be recognized, right? So the reviewer should be able to identify differences between each of these frameworks, that whatever is required, whether it is actually required by the framework and or not. Then international standards in auditing, definitely. So we are reviewing a practice review of an audit firm, of an audit engagement, of an audit assignment. So reviewer should be well versed with international standards on auditing and the practical areas, how these are practically done in an audit engagement. Then auditors reporting obligations regulations 2018 as regards audit report. You know that in Pakistan now, an audit report format is prescribed by auditors reporting obligations regulations 2018, and all of the auditors are required to follow these regulations. So he should understand these reporting obligations. Then code of ethics, most important. Generally, code of ethics, from code of ethics, we note certain kind of observation, let's say professional clearance from the predecessor auditor, whether that has been adequately obtained or not. Then whether the auditor was eligible to be appointed, acceptance and continuance procedures have been adequately followed. So whatever are the requirements of the court, there are certain services which cannot be. There are certain services which are prohibited, so the auditor should not be engaged while doing audit in all those services which cannot be undertaken by the same auditor. The requirements of Companies Act 2017 definitely requirements, whether they apply as regards disclosures prescribed in primarily in fifth schedule for unlisted companies, fifth schedule, and whether they are any other requirements, let's say section 199 as regards loan to associated companies, or whether it's a loan to a director, so requirements of the Companies Act have been followed or not. So all of those requirements of Companies Act, which are generally applicable on a company, so the reviewer should understand those. Provincial WPPF Acts. Now, an important matter. Few years back, WPPF was a federal matter, but now WPPF, Profit Participation Fund, and Workers Welfare Fund, both of these are now a provincial matter, and so likewise, each province has its own acts. So let's say for WPPF acts of all of the provinces, and then federal Islamabad has the federal applicable on that. So all of those five laws. WPPF, I think it's not been notified for Balochistan, I guess. So WPPF and WWF, all of those provincial laws, whatever is applicable. So whatever file you are reviewing, you have to consider which province is applicable, which provincial law is applicable with regard to the registered office of the company, and whether that respective act has been followed. There might be slight differences. There are slight differences in definitions within these provincial acts as well. So Federal Sales Tax Act, there are many services. Definitely now consider a matter that, let's say, the company has not recorded sales tax on its revenue. Now, generally, the applicable rate is, let's say, 17%. So 17% of revenue, if that is not recorded in financial statements, so by any materiality, it has to be material, definitely. It will be far more material. So if that sales tax is applicable and that has not been recorded in the financial statements, not been charged to the customers as applicable and required by the law, so that is a material issue. So the auditor should be able to address it and should be able to consider whether it requires a qualification or whatever appropriate conclusion of that matter is required. So auditor should be able to consider that. And the reviewer should be able to identify whether sales tax was applicable on this kind of service, this kind of revenue, and whether that has been accounted for duly or not, and whether appropriate audit procedures by the auditor have been performed on verification of sales tax. Then sales tax on services for each province. Now, we have a sales tax law for each province, and the federal is another. So Islamabad, we have another sales tax and services law, and we have a separate law for each province on sales tax. So all of those laws, there are certain differences in definition there. The schedules which highlight which of the services are liable to sales tax on services under specific province, there might be differences. So each applicable sales tax law on each province should be, the reviewer should be able to identify that whether that service is covered under sales tax law and whether sales tax was applicable on this particular kind of service revenue of the audit engagement, and whether that has been appropriately accounted for in the financial statements. Then Industrial and Commercial Establishment Standing Orders 1968. Again, this has now been a provincial matter. It was initially federal, but now a provincial matter, and each province has its own law. Now, there are differences between the requirements of this law. Let's say for Sindh, 10 or more workers is the criteria. For Punjab, 49 or more, sorry, for Sindh 20 or more, and for Punjab, for an industrial 49 or more, and for commercial 20 or more workers for each company. In that case, it is required to recognize either a gratuity or a provident fund. So the reviewer should be able to identify that whether the requirements of this respective law has been followed or not. And there might be other cases in which a company, let's say, falls under any different act, or there is a different act that is applicable on the company. So reviewer should be able to identify and should be able to identify the requirements of that law and whether they have been followed for those which can have a material impact on the financial statement. So this I've comprehensively tried to cover the prerequisites for a reviewer for practice review. So IFRS, ISA, reporting obligation, code of ethics, and applicable laws. So next, implementation status of practice review. So there are around 480 non-QCR audit firms all over Pakistan which are currently engaged in audits, which fall under the scope of APRSP, Audit Practice Review and Support Program Framework. As per requirement of the framework, the practice review of the firms was initiated since October 1, 2021. So for the last over 3 years, we are now, for 3 years, we are doing practice reviews. Now, until date, 117 firms have been covered, and we have also done re-reviews of around 30 plus firms. In such manner, basically, practice review is in making its progress, and we would be gaining momentum in the near future as well. Now, decisions by Members Affairs Committee. So the report shall be presented to Members Affairs Committee as discussed previously. So the Members Affairs Committee, as per clause 4.3 of the framework, may take any of the following decision. The Members Affairs Committee might ratify the report of practice review. Let's say they agree that the report is also the report covers all of the points and the observations are valid. So observations are valid. So they would agree to the report of practice review, and whether unsatisfactory or satisfactory, they agree for each audit engagement and decide that file. Correspondingly, decision of the firm shall be made based on results of the majority of the files. Then MAC may require the firm to provide additional information for reconsideration, as I already mentioned that the MAC might ask the director to obtain some more information from the firm and present the case in next meetings after that information. MAC may also require the firm or member for full or partial re-review within 1 year. So the MAC will require the firm for a full review or partial re-review. Full re-review means the whole of the practice review exercise would be done again comprehensively, and 2 audit engagements and ISQC would be reviewed. For partial review, let's say the firm had all of 2 audit engagements, let's say, as satisfactory. And let's say ISQC1 documentation was significantly deficient. So in that case, we can consider the firm might be considered by MAC for a partial review in which we would review the documentation for, let's say, ISQC. So or any other matter in which the MAC might consider that a partial review is required. We were not required to, let's say, do a complete full re-review. So in certain cases, MAC may decide that partial re-review. Then a MAC may decide, in order to improve overall standards of the firm, require the firm or member to undertake certain specified actions. Let's say the MAC may require the partner to undergo certain trainings. Let's say the firm's knowledge as regards IFRS appears deficient. So MAC may decide that the partner is required to obtains training sessions on IFRS. So MAC may also decide that. Refer the matter to investigation committee after 2 re-reviews. Let's say if the firm review the firm once and the result is unsatisfactory, then the MAC decides for a full re-review next year. We review it next time. First re-review, it is again unsatisfactory. MAC will decide another re-review. So in the second re-review, which is practically third review of the same firm, if continuously it fails within three reviews, so then MAC would may refer the matter of that firm to investigation committee that there is significant deficiencies continuously noted in practice review of the firm, or report to investigation committee on any other non-compliance with professional standards. Now, for any other non-compliance, let's say if there is an audit firm and let's say there is no working paper file at all, or let's say the firm has done audit of a large size company, and definitely for large size company, the firm should not have been non-QCR rated as mentioned as required by SRO 1044 of SECP. The firm, in order to undertake a large size company audit, it should be a QCR rated firm, quality control rated firm. So if a firm has done audit of a large size company without obtaining QCR rate, it is actually a non-compliance with professional standards because it's a non-compliance with applicable laws. So in that case, MAC may refer that matter to investigation committee. Next, so appeal. Basically, 2 forums of appeal have been mentioned, have been basically constituted. One each for northern firms and one for south. So for north and south both, there are 2 appellate forums. Each appellate forum comprises of 3 members nominated by the council, one of whom shall be either a judge of a high court or an advocate eligible to be appointed as judge of a high court, who shall be the chairman of the forum. So the judge of the high court or an advocate eligible to be appointed as judge of a high court shall be the chairman of the forum, and there will be 3 members in each forum, one for now, 2 members nominated by the council, and one of whom shall be judge of high court. So 2 forums exist, one for north, one for south. Council member or members affairs committee members shall not be the members of appellate forum to maintain independence. Term of the forum shall be 3 years. No member of the forum shall serve for more than 2 consecutive terms. So after one member, if completing its first term, can be nominated for another term, but after completion of 2 terms, then the member shall not be nominated for another term. A member who completes his 2 terms may be reappointed after a 2-year cooling off period. So he would not be a member of the forum for next 2 years. And after 2 years, he might be considered to be reappointed. Appeal against the decision of members affairs committee can be filed by a firm within 30 days of communication of the decisions of MAC. Definitely, if a decision of MAC is unsatisfactory and it is communicated to the firm may file an appeal to against the decision of MAC. The forum shall give an opportunity of personal hearing to the firm. The forum shall have the power to confirm, either the forum can confirm the decision of MAC, can vary the decision of MAC, or can reverse the decision of MAC, means set aside the decision of MAC. So the forum shall dispose of the appeal preferably within 60 days. An appeal against the decision of the appellate forum, if the firm is not satisfied with the decision of the appellate forum, can only be made at least in high court. So basically no district court or likewise session courts. So appeal cannot be filed in district and session courts. It shall have to be made at least in High Court. Confidentiality for external reviewers, that is also very, very critical matter, that they have to maintain confidentiality. A member of the committee or any other person acting on his behalf, or the director of practice review, or any reviewer, or a staff member of directorate of practice review shall not make use of or disclose the content of any report, working papers, files, books, documents, any material reviewed, any confidential information concerning the affairs of the firm or the member of the clients obtained in course of a practice review to anyone, except to director or director of practice review, the committee, members affairs committee, appellate forum, or the council as required under the program. So we sign off a confidentiality agreement. We sign off confidentiality form for before starting every review, a statement of independence as well for before starting of every review. So in all of those cases, the reviewer shall be so basically it is to comply with the requirements of confidentiality. So thank you. With that, now I can take questions one by one. So questions, if any, kindly mention those questions either in the Q&A box, or if anyone wants to speak, I can give him mic as well. So please do let me know, raise your hands, and I can give you mic as well. So let me first respond to the questions raised. How long a non-QCR remains non-QCR before being blacklisted? Why review of non-QCR? Don't all companies engaged in QCR firms? Basically, how long a non-QCR remains non-QCR? Actually, non-QCR firm can remain for whatever long it is required. I mean, it wishes to. A firm can remain a non-QCR firm for whatever time he wants to. Like, if he wants to obtain a QCR rating, which is a voluntary process, he can apply for QCR and obtain QCR rating. Now, advantages of QCR rating, what are those advantages? Advantage ये है कि he would be able to do audits of large size companies, public interest companies. Public interest companies he would also be required to register it with Audit Oversight Board. For Audit Oversight Board, the prerequisite is a QCR rating. So if a firm gets QCR rating, he can get registered with Audit Oversight Board, and in that case, he can do public interest companies as well. If he alone has a QCR rating and does not get itself registered with AOB, he can still do small, medium, and large size company audits. So these are the advantages. Now, why review of non-QCR? I already mentioned in the start of my session that it is a requirement for SMO1, Statement of Members Obligation of IFAC. All of IFAC compliant countries are required to follow SMOs of IFAC. So IFAC requires that all audit firms that are engaged in audit should be periodically reviewed. So that is actually why we have to review a non-QCR rated firm. Don't all companies engage in QCR rated firms? No, there are many, many companies. I think Pakistan has more than 65,000 companies. I think more than 65,000 companies are there in Pakistan registered with SECP. Not exactly, I remember the number, but more than 65,000. So all of those are definitely not large size. So definitely there are many small size and single member and medium size companies which are audited by non-QCR rated firms. Next question, slides. We can share with the participants. You can mention you already registered with your email address, and if required, we can send this presentation to you. The members which are certified as external reviewers under this program, I already mentioned, it was already mentioned in the brochure circulated. There will be two trainings. Number one, this is IFRS training, which will take 4 days, 2 weekends, Saturday, Sunday, this one, and the next one. This covers IFRS. And then there will be another training, which is SMP Audit Skills Enhancement Series that will be launched soon. That will cover primarily the auditing standards in a little detail. So, and applicable laws as well. So that training will also be mandatory for person to get registered for external practice review. He has to attend both of the trainings. Only then a certificate will be issued. Presentation copies मिल जाएंगी. Practice review by ICAP and AOB similar. नहीं, practice review AOB नहीं करता. AOB does not carry out practice review. Practice reviews are only done by ICAP. Practice review are those reviews which are performed under practice review framework for non-QCR rated firms, and those and for QCR rated firms, basically it is quality control review, which is performed by quality control department, quality assurance department, and the next session will be for quality assurance department, and my colleague Fahad Parvez will conduct that session. Difference between quality control review and practice review by ICAP and AOB. AOB practice review नहीं करता, ना AOB quality control review करता है. AOB can take suo motu action, or if it is not satisfied as well with quality control review, so then only that in few cases, and AOB considers appropriate for, let's say, a risk is there for them. So in that case, it conducts a review, field review. Generally, most of the cases, AOB basically reviews the documentation and the process followed by quality control review department, QAD, quality assurance department. Quality control review की सारी documentation is submitted to audit oversight board, and it reviews that as in detail. For practice review, we are not connected to AOB. Practice review we perform independently for those firms which are non-QCR rated. Is there a checklist for points needed to be checked for tax laws and labor laws? अच्छा, लेबर लॉज में प्राइमरली तो आपके पास जो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स थे, देखें आपको डिटेल में उन रिक्वायरमेंट्स पे नहीं जाना फॉर ऑल लॉज कि जी मसलन फैक्ट्री ने फला चीजें, सेफ्टी, हार्नेसिंग, ब्ला ब्ला ब्ला, व्हाटएवर इज रिक्वायर्ड बाय फैक्ट्रीज एक्ट 1934. नो, हमने उसको इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से रिव्यू करना है कि those requirements which might have a material impact on financial statements. So only that requirement affects the financial statement. So whether those are complied or not. For instance, labor law में primarily जैसे मैंने mention किया कि retirement benefit is one of those critical areas. For WPPF, WWF, अब आपने वो बाकी सारी clauses की बजाय सबसे important ये है कि whether the company is profit making, उसने accrue कर लिया है कि नहीं कर लिया, और secondly जो उस पे timely payment की requirement है वो follow हो गई है या नहीं हो गई, प्रॉफिट पार्टिसिपेशन फंड या वेलफेयर फंड. अच्छा, चेकलिस्ट जो है टैक्स लॉज, लेबर लॉज, वो मैंने बता दिया. टैक्स, अभी इस पे एक ऑडिट प्रैक्टिस मैनुअल, एक इनिशियल एक डॉक्यूमेंटेशन था ICAP का, वो काफी पुराना हो गया है, which is there on ICAP website, 2012 का वो है. That is being revised at ICAP internally. तो उस पे काम हो रहा है, and as soon as it is revised, that will be placed on ICAP website, and that includes tax laws checklist as well as labor law checklist. Zaid Absab, difference between QCR and practice review मैंने initially explain किया था कि quality control review is applicable to QCR rated firms and practice review applicable to all those firms which are not QCR rated. Number one. Number two, generally क्वालिटी कंट्रोल रिव्यू के परव्यू में लिस्टेड कंपनीज आएंगी और लार्ज साइज भी आएंगी और देयर वुड बी मीडियम साइज एज वेल। हमारे परव्यू में जनरली ज्यादातर आ रही होती है मीडियम साइज, लार्ज साइज नहीं आएंगी। अगर किसी ने की भी है तो दैट इज एन, किसी ने ऑडिट किया भी है लार्ज साइज का तो वो दैट इज नॉन कंप्लायंस ऑफ लॉ, बिकॉज वो लार्ज साइज कंपनी का ऑडिट नहीं हो सकता विदाउट QCR रेटिंग। तो हमारे परव्यू में ज्यादातर आएंगी मीडियम साइज, स्मॉल साइज। मीडियम साइज में फ्रेमवर्क दोनों हो सकते हैं। इट माइट बी IFRS फॉर SME या किसी ने वॉलंटरली IFRS अडॉप्ट कर लिया है, तो फ्रेमवर्क्स बोथ आर देयर। But as regards category of the company, so generally we review medium size and small size. Large size is non-compliant, वो QCR के बगैर नहीं की जा सकती, तो that is required. Is there a standard checklist? मैंने फजल साहब मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया कि स्टैंडर्ड चेकलिस्ट डेफिनेटली है। वो ICAP की वेबसाइट पे APRSP के टैब में एंगेजमेंट रिव्यू चेकलिस्ट भी मौजूद है, ISQC1 चेकलिस्ट भी मौजूद है, और काइंडली आप उसको रेफर कीजिए, उसको डाउनलोड कीजिए, उसको डिटेल से स्टडी कीजिए। Compliance of Social Security and EOBI laws should also be considered during review and extent of review. अच्छा, सोशल सिक्योरिटी लॉ एंड EOBI लॉ, बेसिकली इफ दैट हैज अ मटेरियल इम्पैक्ट ऑन द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट उसको देख लीजिए। वो कंप्लायंस जो मैंडेटरी बेशक है लेकिन उनका कोई फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट पे मटेरियल इम्पैक्ट नहीं है, इसमें आपको गाइडेंस ये लेनी पड़ेगी नोक्लार से, आइजा 250, आइजा 250 कंप्लायंस विद एप्लीकेबल लॉज। आइजा 250 आपको इस पे गाइड करता है कि ऑडिटर ने इस पे क्या ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म करने हैं, और रिव्यूअर ने वही ऑडिट प्रोसीजर सिर्फ रिव्यू करने हैं विच इज रिक्वायर्ड बाय आइजा 250 इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ एप्लीकेबल लॉज। If a law has an insignificant impact on financial statements, उसमें आप भी I mean you can even ignore that or even can just highlight that observation, but that would definitely not be a significant observation for deciding of decision on the file. But a law has to have a financial impact on the financial statement. अगर कोई ऐसा लॉ है जिसमें कंप्लायंस थी, 4 रजिस्टर्स कोई डॉक्यूमेंट्स मेंटेन करने थे, वो फर्म वो नहीं किए किसी कंपनी ने, और ऑडिटर ने वो चेक नहीं की डॉक्यूमेंटेशन, उसका लेट से कोई इम्पैक्ट फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट पे नहीं है, सो ऑडिटर इज नॉट बाउंड टू review that. A reviewer is not bound to review that requirement compliance of that law. If a firm is providing services other than audit, like tax is not under the scope of practice review. Advisory services, advisory एक general term है। अगर audit, assurance और related services, इस यानी आइजा 3000 की जो सीरीज है, अगर या 4000 में अगर वहां कवर हो रहा है, उसने रिपोर्ट अंडर दोज लॉज दी है, तो वो कवर्ड हैं, स्कोप में फॉल करते हैं अंडर प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू। लेकिन मैंने मेंशन किया था कि इनिशियली वी हैव स्टार्टेड ऑफ विद द रिव्यू ऑफ ऑडिट ओनली, तो अभी हम ऑडिट का साइकिल फॉलो कर रहे हैं। So we have not yet started reviews of assurance and related services. So we have initially we are going ahead with audit only. Audit skills enhancement courses available on e-learning hub. नहीं, वो ऑनलाइन नहीं, एक इन पर्सन कोर्स लॉन्च होगा, तो वो दैट विल हैव टू बी basically attended by a person to get himself enrolled as external practice reviewer. Repository of updated laws नहीं है अभी, ICAP की नहीं है वो, you have to refer to relevant books of applicable laws. Once this certification is obtained, do the practitioner need to renew it each year? अच्छा देखें, नंबर 1 ये बहुत कैटेगोरिकली मेंशन्ड भी है, एनी पर्सन जो कि प्रैक्टिस लाइसेंस ऑलरेडी जिसके पास होगा या वो ऑडिट फर्म से कनेक्टेड है इन कैपेसिटी लेट्स से ऑफ अ मैनेजर और व्हाट, सो हम इनिशियली उसे तो कंसिडर नहीं करेंगे एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर। क्योंकि वहां फिर हमें इंडिपेंडेंस के और ऑब्जेक्टिविटी के इश्यूज आएंगे. सो टू obtain that is why this course has been launched for non-practicing members. इसकी टू द प्रैक्टिशनर नीड टू रिन्यू इट ईच ईयर. अभी ये सर्टिफिकेशन आप वन टाइम ले लीजिए, उसके बाद हम खुद उसकी परफॉर्मेंस को, प्रैक्टिशनर को, रिव्यूअर को हम कॉन्टिन्यूसली हर रिव्यू के बाद खुद असेस कर रहे होंगे. एंड अभी उसके हमने गाइडलाइंस नहीं बनी और उसकी अप्रूवल इन प्रोसेस है कि एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर को हम मैकेनिज्म को अभी इन प्रोसेस है कि हम उसको एग्जैक्टली फॉलो कैसे करेंगे. लेकिन फॉर ईच एंगेजमेंट हम उसको रिव्यू इन डिटेल उसकी परफॉर्मेंस को जरूर कर रहे होंगे. एंड देयर माइट बी अ केस दैट इफ रिव्यूअर इज नॉट कंसिडर्ड एज सेटिस्फैक्ट्री, लेट्स से वो सही सारी डेफिशिएंसी सही तरीके से आइडेंटिफाई नहीं कर सका, कुछ मेजर इश्यूज रह गए उससे, so it might be possible that we might not consider him for next review और हम किसी और को कंसिडर करें. बिकॉज हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव है एक क्वालिटी का प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू परफॉर्म करना है विद क्वालिटी. सो एक अच्छी क्वालिटी का प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू परफॉर्म करना ऑब्जेक्टिव है. सो विद दैट ऑब्जेक्टिव शुड बी मेट. नॉन क्यूसीआर रेटेड फर्म रजिस्टर नहीं कर सकती एओबी से, बिकॉज एओबी की रजिस्ट्रेशन का प्री रिक्विजिट है क्यूसीआर रेटेड फर्म. अच्छा जी, देन there are 480 firms. For how many firms practice review is being carried so far? मैंने बताया था, आपने स्लाइड शायद मिस कर दी. मैंने बताया था 117. How many firms go to appellate forum? How many firms go to high courts? अभी तक कोई हाई कोर्ट तो नहीं गया है. appellate में कितनी फर्म जा सकती हैं, वो मेंशन करना कितनी गई है एग्जैक्टली मेरे ख्याल है वो इस फोरम पे शेयर करना अप्रोप्रिएट नहीं होगा. अच्छा, what if one find material misstatement while conducting review to the firm then needs to modify their opinion? No. फर्म अपना ओपिनियन इशू कर चुकी. आपने एक हिस्टोरिक चीज देखनी है. हिस्टोरिक चीज ये है कि जी पार्टनर अपनी एंगेजमेंट कंक्लूड कर चुका. वो एंगेजमेंट अगर एससीसीपी से फाइल होनी है तो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट विद ऑडिट रिपोर्ट फाइल हो गए. उसके अगेंस्ट टैक्स रिटर्न अगर फाइल होनी थी, लेट्स से या तो वो हो गई होगी या नियर फ्यूचर में होने वाली है. अब ओपिनियन भी मॉडिफाई नहीं की जा सकता, फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट भी मॉडिफाई नहीं की जा सकती. ठीक है. और अगर फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट ऑडिटर ने कंसिडर करना है, हम नहीं कहेंगे, कतअन नहीं, हमारा कोई काम नहीं है कहना कि जी आप अपनी रिपोर्ट या फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट मॉडिफाई करें. उन्होंने अगर मॉडिफिकेशन करनी है अपने ओपिनियन की, तो वो आइजा का एक सेपरेट आइजा है जो इसको डील करता है कि ऑडिट ओपिनियन वाला, कि जी ऑडिट ओपिनियन अगर वहाँ रिक्वायर्ड है, उसने चेंज करना है, मॉडिफाई करना है, तो वहाँ आइजा की रिक्वायरमेंट्स है वो फॉलो करनी है. रीजन वाई आईकैप इज हायरिंग एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर्स. आईकैप के स्कोप में 480 फर्म्स हैं, काफी ज्यादा हैं, तो हम उसको असाइनमेंट बेसिस पे भी करके चाह रहे हैं कि एक एक्सटेंसिव टीम हमारे पास बिल्ड हो जाए, जो रादर देन वो हमारे पास बिल्ड होके बेसिकली परफॉर्म कर सके ऑन एन असाइनमेंट बेसिस एज वेल. एक अच्छी वर्कफोर्स अवेलेबल हो जाए. अच्छा, इफ न्यूली इंडक्टेड पार्टनर्स more than 50% are not doing audit, तो जाहिर है हम उसको 1 ईयर बेसिस पे रिव्यू नहीं करेंगे. वो एंगेज इन ऑडिट हो तो करेंगे. हाउ मेनी मेंबर्स रजिस्टर्ड फॉर दिस कोर्स? अब ये बताना यहाँ अप्रोप्रिएट नहीं है. रिकॉर्डिंग ऑफ दीज सेशंस प्रिंसिपली हम कर रहे होंगे, लेकिन देख लेंगे, इसको यूट्यूब पे प्लेस कर देंगे और लिंक पार्टिसिपेंट्स को दे देंगे. इसको देख लेते हैं. अभी तो आप इसको अटेंड कीजिए इन प्रोग्राम्स को इन डिटेल रिकॉर्डिंग से पहले. ऑडिट स्किल्स एनहांसमेंट को वो इन पर्सन होगा, उसमें बहुत सारी मैटर्स हैं, वो फिजिकल ही होगा, और कुछ इन अदर स्टेशंस के लिए ऑनलाइन का होगा. वो एक हाइब्रिड सेशन होगा अपेरेंटली. If a member is practicing as a manager in any foreign country, can he be certified in this program? So if certified हो सकते हैं, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये होगी कि he has to be updated with applicable laws. देखें, पाकिस्तान में laws are significant और उसमें रेगुलर चेंजेस बहुत आती रहती हैं। टैक्स लॉ में हर साल एक हमारे पास मेजर चेंजेस आ रहती हैं। अभी आपको अगर पता हो 154 एक्सपोर्टर्स को एफबीआर ने जो है वो फाइनल टैक्स से मिनिमम टैक्स में कर दिया है। अब वो फाइनल टैक्स से जब मिनिमम टैक्स में किया है तो अचानक से वहां डेफर टैक्स एप्लीकेबल हो गया है। उस पर आईकैप ने अभी गाइड 8 आई थिंक आई गेस 8-10 दिन पहले इशू की है आईकैप ने गाइड कि जी उसकी डेफर टैक्सेशन का क्या करना है। सो ये पाकिस्तान में लॉज आर सिग्निफिकेंट, तो उनको हमें देखना पड़ेगा कि वो रिक्वायरमेंट्स अपडेटेड होनी चाहिए उनके जहन में, अपडेटेड इंफॉर्मेशन लॉज की। कैन वी सिलेक्ट फाइल फ्रॉम डिफरेंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर और स्पेसिफिक फॉर ओनली 1 ईयर ओनली? नहीं, हम लास्ट ईयर पे जा सकते हैं फॉर रीजंस टू बी डिस्कस्ड विद द डायरेक्टर ऑफ प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू। वो आप डायरेक्टर से डिस्कस कर लेंगे, मैं गाइड कर दूंगा कि जी हम अगर हमारे पास कोई रीजंस बनती है कि जी पिछले साल की कोई फाइल के सिग्निफिकेंट साइज है या उसमें कोई आपको सिग्निफिकेंट इश्यूज नजर आ रहे हैं, रिस्क नजर आ रहे हैं, तो उस पर वी कैन गो टू दैट फाइल। टेक्निकल prerequisites, what more is required from the reviewer like working in industry ACA? अच्छा देखें, एक इम्पॉर्टेंट बात है, हमारे पास प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू के स्कोप में जो ऑडिट फर्म्स हैं इन जनरल, उनके लिए अभी ऑडिट सॉफ्टवेयर डेफिनेटली वो पीआईसी के ऑडिट नहीं करते, वो तो मैंडेटरी नहीं है ऑडिट सॉफ्टवेयर। सो मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस फाइल जो हैं वो फिजिकल होती हैं। नंबर 1, फिजिकल फाइल्स होती हैं। अच्छा, सेकेंडली ये कि ऑडिट फर्म्स इन जनरल डू नॉट अलाउ कि जी आप फाइल्स को ले जाएं घर पे या किसी और लोकेशन पे रिव्यू कर लें। 99% बल्कि 100% आई वुड से, इन ऑलमोस्ट 100% ऑफ द केसेस हमें फाइल रिव्यू करनी पड़ती है फर्म के प्रेमिसेस पे जाके, और वहीं पे सारी वो चेकलिस्ट और रिव्यू परफॉर्म करना पड़ता है फर्म के प्रेमिसेस पे। तो अब इसके लिए आपको टाइम ऐसे मैनेज करना है कि वो कम से कम, और जनरली द रिव्यू टेक्स 5 days, 5 working days, मंडे टू फ्राइडे। तो इसके लिए टाइम मैनेज करना पड़ेगा। अगर एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर ये टाइम एक वीक का, और जिस वीक में वो अवेलेबल है वो इंडिकेट करके बता सकता है, हम उसको स्केड्यूल उसके अकॉर्डिंगली कर सकते हैं कि जी आप उस वीक में परफॉर्म कर दें। हाँ, अगर ऑडिट फर्म इस पे राजी हो गई, जो कि अभी तक तो अग्री नहीं करती कि वो अपनी फाइल्स को प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू के लिए दे दें, तो अभी तक तो नहीं ऐसा कोई केस हुआ कि वो नहीं एग्री करते जनरली। अगर एग्री कर जाएं तो वी कैन प्रोवाइड द फाइल्स टू द रिव्यूअर टू रिव्यू इट रिमोटली। दैट इज पॉसिबल, वी डोंट हैव अ लिमिटेशन ऑन दैट, बट ये लिमिटेशन जरूर है, हमारी साइड से नहीं है लेकिन ऑडिट फर्म की साइड से है कि वो दे डोंट अलाउ अस टू रिव्यू फाइल्स रिमोटली। अवेलेबिलिटी डेफिनेटली होनी चाहिए। अगर आप अवेलेबल होंगे किसी स्पेसिफिक वीक में, आप हमें बता देंगे, वी वुड कॉन्टैक्ट एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर के भाई आप फला वीक में हम इस फर्म पे स्केड्यूल करना चाह रहे हैं, वुड यू बी अवेलेबल? सो अगर हमारे पास एक पूल ऑफ एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर्स है, लेट्स से 10 लोगों का, तो हम उस पूल से अकॉर्डिंगली उन्हें सर्कुलेट करके पूछ लेंगे, तो जो लोग अवेलेबल होंगे उसके अकॉर्डिंगली कंफर्मेशन कर दी जाएगी फर्म को। और वो जाहिर है हम एक सर्टेन टाइम इन एडवांस पूछ लेंगे, वो बिल्कुल लास्ट वीक में नहीं पूछेंगे। अच्छा, इफ द फर्म कम्स अप विद एडिशनल वर्किंग पेपर्स कवर्स अप अटेम्प्ट्स, इसको हम केस टू केस बेसिस पे डिस्कस कर सकते हैं, देख सकते हैं कि वो उसमें क्या होगा, वो उस टाइम पे रिव्यूअर डिस्कस कर लेगा तो हम अकॉर्डिंगली गाइड कर देंगे। प्रोसीजर टू सिलेक्ट इंडिपेंडेंट रिव्यूअर, मैंने बताया कि ये प्रोग्राम और सेकेंडली आयजा का प्रोग्राम जो एसएमपी ऑडिट स्किल्स के नाम से होगा, ये दोनों प्रोग्राम मैंडेटरी हैं। उसके बाद जो भी लोग बेसिकली चाहते हैं कि वो रजिस्टर कर लें, वो जैसे इस पे मेंशन्ड है पीआर या हसन रिव्यू, हसन रसूल का नंबर मेंशन्ड है, आप अकॉर्डिंगली ईमेल कर दीजिए अपनी इंटेंशन की टू रजिस्टर एंड वी विल कंसिडर दैट अकॉर्डिंग। लेकिन इस पे फाइनल डिसीजन जाहिर है आईकैप लेगा कि किसको रजिस्टर करना है और किसको नहीं। वो हम सारी चीजें इवेलुएट कर लेंगे कि मसलन उस पर्सन का बैकग्राउंड जो है वो अगर तो किसी ऑडिट फर्म से रेगुलरली कनेक्टेड है तो वो शायद मुश्किल होगा हमारे लिए इंडिपेंडेंस। अच्छा, इन केस ऑफ सिलेक्शन आप क्वालिटी कंट्रोल रिव्यू, अच्छा ये हम इन जनरल आगे कर सकते हैं नदीम साहब के, जो सक्सेसफुली हमारे साथ कुछ रिव्यूज परफॉर्म कर लेंगे तो वी कैन कंसिडर। और वंस ये प्रोग्राम भी अगर क्वालिटी कंट्रोल रिव्यूअर क्यूसीआर डिपार्टमेंट में भी एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर इन जनरल अप्रूव हो जाता है। तो अभी हम इनिशियली इसे प्रैक्टिस रिव्यू के लिए लॉन्च कर रहे हैं। उसमें तो जो सक्सेसफुल एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर्स होंगे, जो सक्सेसफुली अच्छे तरीके से रिव्यू की क्वालिटी मेंटेन करके परफॉर्म कर रहे होंगे, सो दोज वुड बी कंसिडर्ड टू माइट बी कंसिडर्ड फॉर क्वालिटी कंट्रोल रिव्यू। लेकिन इसकी मैं अभी गारंटी इसलिए नहीं कर सकता कि डेफिनेटली इस पे डिसीजन काउंसिल नहीं लेना है, राइट? अच्छा, I think I've answered all of the questions which were there in the chat box in the Q&A session. Acha, there are certain comments as well. Let me respond to those. ये एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर्स डेफिनेटली मैंने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया, नॉन क्यूसी ऑडिटेड फर्म्स के रिव्यू में हम यूटिलाइज करेंगे। फॉर्मेट ऑफ रिपोर्ट, अच्छा जो रिपोर्ट हमने देनी है डेफिनेटली उसका एक फॉर्मेट है। वो फॉर्मेट हम रिस्पेक्टिव एक्सटर्नल रिव्यूअर के साथ शेयर कर देंगे कि जिस फॉर्मेट में वो रिपोर्ट बनती है उस पे यू नीड टू हैव अ रीजनेबल रिटन इंग्लिश कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स एज वेल, कि हम टेक्निकली उसको एक अच्छे तरीके से ड्राफ्ट कर सकें जो कि एक प्रेजेंटेबल फॉर्म में, जो हमारा एक जनरल स्टैंडर्ड है उसको फॉलो करते हुए हम फॉर्म को भेज सकें। अच्छा, बलूचिस्तान WPPF, मैंने बलूचिस्तान के WWF के लिए बात की थी, WPPF इज एप्लीकेबल। ऑडिट स्किल्स एनहांसमेंट आप काइंडली इन पर्सन लेंगे लिंक्ड टू दिस प्रोग्राम आफ्टर दिस, या उसको ऑनलाइन लेंगे। उसके बाद वो दोनों सर्टिफिकेशंस कंसिडर होंगी और उसके बाद हम किसी को कर सकेंगे सर्टिफाई। देन is there anyone else who intends to ask question through mic, so I can give her the mic to that? Please raise your hand and I can जी नदीम साहब आपको माइक दे दिया, प्लीज कहिए।
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, please.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to all of you. Or it's a good initiative, I think so that. तो चलें इंशाल्लाह देखते हैं नेक्स्ट इसका क्या प्लान बनता है, और जो सेकंड वन सर्टिफिकेशन बात कर रहे हैं आप उसको भी देखते हैं, और फिर पैनल पे देखते हैं कि कितने शॉर्टलिस्ट होते हैं एक्सटर्नल ऑडिटर और उनको क्या रोल और रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी दी जाती है। तो इसका आउटकम तो तभी इवेल्युएट होगा ना सर। एक मेरा छोटा सा ये था कि वैसे ही रिमार्क्स है, क्वेश्चन ऐसा नहीं था, वो तो जस्ट मैंने ऐसे ही इनके ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स तोला साहब के हुए हैं कि नहीं, जस्ट ऑन अ लाइटर नोट इफ यू डोंट माइंड।
जी तोला साहब एक्चुअली वो इमीडिएटली किसी ट्रैवल में है, ही वुड कनेक्ट सून, और वो अभी तोला साहब वुड बी पार्ट ऑफ दिस, उनका कुछ सेशन थोड़ा सा डिले हो गया, ही विल बी जॉइनिंग अस शॉर्टली।
तो क्या उनको अब हम लोग ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स का नाम देंगे या कुछ और दें?
वो ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स इनिशियली प्लान थे, जाहिर है अब उनको सिर्फ रिमार्क्स का नाम दे देंगे, आप बताइए।
चलें जस्ट ऑन अ लाइटर नोट,
एनी
मैंने
अदर
कहा थोड़ा
क्वेश्चन?
बहुत।
जी
नो
चलें,
थैंक
थैंक
यू।
यू। एनीवन एल्स प्लीज? So if there is anyone else, जी मिस्टर दिलदार अली साहब, जी प्लीज, माइक इज विद यू। जी दिलदार साहब, यू आर ऑडिबल, प्लीज। दिलदार साहब, आई कांट हेयर यू, प्लीज। हेलो दिलदार साहब, काइंडली अपना माइक चेक कर लीजिए। एंड हेलो जी, एनीवन एल्स? दिलदार साहब अपना क्वेश्चन चैट बॉक्स में लिख दीजिए, फिर अगर आप, आई थिंक आपका माइक मुझे आवाज नहीं आ पा रही। ओके जी, विद दैट आई थिंक आई गेस देयर आर नो मोर क्वेश्चंस, so I come to an end of my session. Thank you very much for very patiently listening to it. And if there are any, if there are any other questions, so you can write your questions to, send your questions to Hassan Rasool, whose name and number was mentioned in the brochure, and I can respond those as well. Right. Thank you very much. And there will be a session again. Now there will be the next session, which will be conducted by my colleague, Mr. Fahad Parvez, and he will be conducting that session on how to conduct a quality control review. अच्छा, गुलाम मोहिउद्दीन साहब का क्वेश्चन है लास्टली, इज देयर एनी कॉस्ट फी फॉर द फर्म? नो, अभी ये को फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट है. वी डू नॉट चार्ज एनी फी टू द ऑडिट फर्म. राइट जी, थैंक यू वेरी मच. थैंक यू.